Greetings, fellow moviegoers, and welcome to Movie Central, the place to talk about movies, TV shows based on movies, toys based on movies, games based on movies, and rides based on movies. I'm your host, Mr. CCS. This is my pet gorilla, George, and this is my pet dog, Walt. He wanted to hang out with me today. Now, I beat the graboids, and now I'm back in my usual location. So, let's continue with the review. It's been a bit of time since we talked about the Terminator on this channel, so why not return to it by discussing the sequel to it? And when I say that, I mean a sequel that is not only better than the original, but also one of the greatest sequels of all time. But, before we dive into any of that, let's talk about the brief history that led up to this movie's release. In my review for the first film, #shameless plug, I mentioned that the original idea for the first movie was to have two robots travel back in time to try to kill Sarah Connor, the T-800 and a shape-shifting liquid metal one. However, James Cameron felt that the technology at the time couldn't handle an effect that was needed to convincingly pull off the shape changing. So they scrapped the liquid metal concept and stuck with simply the T-800, which eventually worked out in the end. However, after the success of the first movie, it was a no-brainer to make a sequel. You might be wondering why on earth it took so long to be released. To put it simply, Cameron was busy with other projects at the time, such as Aliens and The Abyss. However, due to Arnold Schwarzenegger's interest in a sequel, by 1989 the project was in full development. Not only did this project involve a change in tones, but also was a race against the clock story, which would determine the fate of the future, with both Skynet and the Resistance sending out Terminators to the past, which of course is where the liquid metal Terminator came into play. The movie was released in the summer of 1991 and was an enormous success, grossing over $500 million at the box office, which is a huge achievement for any movie, and critics enjoyed it as well, calling it one of the best action films ever made, a statement which remains intact by many, myself included. But why? We are going to find out today. This is Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Set 11 years after the events of the first movie, young John Connor, played by Edward Furlong, the key to civilization's victory over a future robot uprising, is the target of the shape-shifting T-1000, played by Robert Patrick, a Terminator sent from the future to kill him. Another Terminator, the revamped T-800, played again by Arnold Schwarzenegger, has been sent back to protect the boy. As John and his mother, Sarah Connor, played again by Linda Hamilton, go on the run with the T-800, with the boy forming an unexpected bond with the robot along the journey. You'd be surprised to hear from me that I actually like this one a lot more than the first film. Not only is it a stellar action movie, but it also takes the lore established in the first movie and runs with it, giving us a broader understanding of what the world these movies are set in really looks and feels like. Not only does it perfectly expand upon the first movie's world, but also gives us a definitive ending to the overall story, which the studio keeps trying to botch, but that's neither here nor there. Anyways, I've made it clear at this point that Terminator 2 is a great story, but what else works about it? Well, let's find out. Now, the easy highlight of this movie for me is the bond between the T-800 and John Connor. Keep in mind, Arnold was the big bad of the first movie, and the assumption was that he was going to continue to be the antagonist as the films went on. But to their surprise, he's actually a reprogrammed android sent by John Connor in the future to protect his younger self. So the audience goes from being afraid of Arnold to actively trusting him, and actually feeling sorry that he has to get destroyed by the end, which is what made the character of the T-800 less one-dimensional and one that was actually three-dimensional and not just a robot, and that was one of the movie's strengths to me. The reason he actually becomes a three-dimensional character, however, is because of John Connor. John starts off being portrayed as a bad boy, but we get to know him, and you see a sensitive side to him. A troubled child may be, but at the same time, he's still got a good soul attached to him. His relationship with the Terminator in this movie felt like a true father-son bond that many projects seemed to lack at the time, and I thought it worked beautifully. John teaches the Terminator some human slang in an attempt to make it seem more down-to-earth and less robotic, and it ultimately works in both of their advantages, with John having a father figure and the T-800 having successfully completed its task. This is beautiful writing, and it makes me upset that Dark Fate completely ruined this whole arc, but that's neither here nor there. As far as Sarah goes, she continues her arc from the last movie, but she also grows a bit of a backbone. After spending many years in a mental hospital, she became way more skittish and frightened of the potential future, which she immediately tried to warn others about to no avail. When she's freed from the hospital, she joins the group and becomes the imposing tough soldier we all know and love. This movie cements Sarah Connor as one of cinema's most iconic and best female characters, right up there with Ellen Ripley, Princess Leia, and so on and so forth. And that's all down to James Cameron knowing exactly what he was doing. Now we get to the villain, the T-1000. If you thought the T-800 was a sadistic, manipulative, and brutal antagonist, oh boy, you have not seen anything yet. The T-1000 is far more advanced, frightening, and brutal when compared to the T-800. This android is made out of liquid metal, making it difficult to actually take it out. It can take on the appearance of anybody, create different weapons with its protoplasm, and on top of that, the movie doesn't make it obvious that this thing is evil. It dresses up like a cop and even interacts with a more advanced vocabulary. This is far more manipulative and sadistic than the T-800 from the first movie, and that's what makes him an imposing and frightening threat, something that can never be repeated. The T-1000 is up there on my list of favorite movie villains of all time, and is easily one of my favorite movie monsters in recent memory. As far as the other characters go, Peter Silberman has a larger role, and Miles Dyson, played by Joe Morton, has a significant part to play, being the founder of Skynet and the man who ultimately destroys it in the end. T2 really knew what it wanted to be in regards to a movie, and the characters add on to that and then some. There is something else that adds on to the quality that this movie has, and that is the effects. First things first, the practical effects that bring the T-800 to life were great, even better than the original back in 1984, as a lot of the practical explosions too were great. However, the most credit I can give the movie's effects is in regards to the use of CGI. The T-1000 is brought to life mostly in CG form when it's in its metal state, and it looks great. It's an imposing looking metal android, and the effect will always hold up. Add to that the scene where the T-1000 walks through metal bars also holds up very well, and looks real, which is the reason why it's insane that some movies from today look worse. There are some practical effects regarding the T-1000 though, such as the sculpted explosion head thing, I don't know what to call it, as well as the hydrogen frozen one in the iconic Hasta La Vista baby moment. But yes, the effects are incredible and they always will hold up until the end of time itself. As far as the music goes, Brad Fiedel returned to give T2 its iconic score, which conveys a sense of adrenaline, sweetness, and even sadness whenever it needs to. It's a lot more dynamic than the score for the first movie, and I must commend Fiedel for giving us something great. And finally, we have the action sequences, which hold up extremely well. The truck scene in the LA River is so awesome and is one of the best practical action scenes ever made. The escape from the hospital, blowing up Skynet, and the final battle are also incredible and really highlight James Cameron's wonderful use of action in his movies. So overall, Terminator 2 Judgment Day is one hell of a sequel. It does everything a sequel should do and much, much more. I'd easily call it one of the greatest sequels and movies in recent memory. That is something I do not say lightly. This is the reason why the movie earns a 10 out of 10. Well, that's it for this review. I'm not reviewing any other Terminator film on this show because I have no incentive to. They're not good. The first two are, and that's all that matters. So, tune in next week for another review. With that said, my name is Mr. CCS, this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap. See you next week.